I never thought I'd be standing outside a bank at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, staring at my account balance in disbelief. Zero. The college fund my grandparents had started for me when I was born, the one my parents had been contributing to for 21 years, was completely empty. Not just low, not just reduced, empty. As in, someone had withdrawn $43,892 76 times without telling me. And that someone was supposed to love me more than anyone else in the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Emma Mitchell, and this is the story of how I discovered just how far my parents would go to please my brother, and how I finally found the courage to stand up for myself, even if it meant bringing our whole family crashing down. It was supposed to be a celebration. After 2 years of juggling part-time jobs and full-time classes, I'd finally earned my associate's degree from Oakridge Community College. My plan had always been clear. Get my associate's, then transfer to Penn State for my bachelor's in education. My parents knew this. We'd talked about it for years, how my community college route would save money, how the college fund would cover my final 2 years at university. That spring afternoon, I'd stopped by my parents' colonial-style house in the upscale part of the Oakridge for what I thought would be a small graduation dinner. Mom had texted saying she'd made my favorite, her famous lasagna with garlic knots. It felt like a peace offering after months of strained conversation. Maybe things were finally getting back to normal. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my brother Ryan's Mercedes parked in my usual spot. Nothing new there. Ryan always got the prime parking spot, the biggest slice of cake, the loudest congratulations. At 28, he was working at our dad's insurance company, being groomed to take over the family business someday. The golden child who could do no wrong. I grabbed my purse and the acceptance letter I'd received from Penn State earlier that week. Despite everything, I was excited to share my news. The moment I walked through the front door, I should have known something was off. The dining room table was set with Mom's best china, the set reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Dad was wearing a button-down shirt instead of his usual post-work t-shirt. And Ryan was standing by the fireplace with his arm around his girlfriend, Vanessa, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. "There she is!" Dad boomed, lifting his wine glass. "The graduate!" Mom hurried over, pulling me into a lavender-scented hug. "We're so proud of you, honey." Something in her voice sounded rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. I scanned the room, noticing champagne bottles and a large envelope on the coffee table with Ryan and Vanessa's names written. In calligraphy? "What's going on?" I asked, setting my purse down. I thought this was just dinner. Ryan stepped forward, his perfect white teeth gleaming. "We have some big news, Em. Vanessa and I are engaged." Vanessa thrust her left hand toward me, a diamond the size of a small planet catching the light. "We're getting married in August at Lakeside Resort." August, just 3 months away. And Lakeside Resort was the most expensive venue in the state, with a rumored 2-year waiting list. "Wow," I managed. "That's fast. Congratulations." I looked at my parents, who were beaming at Ryan like he'd just announced he'd cured cancer. Mom wiped a tear from her eye. "We're so happy," she gushed. "Our first wedding in the family." Dad cleared his throat. "And we have some news for you too, Emma. Why don't we all sit down?" We gathered around the dining table, the lasagna cooling in the center. Dad poured champagne for everyone, including an extra full glass for me. Warning bells started ringing. In my head. "Emma," Dad began, his voice taking on that tone he used when explaining why Ryan deserved a new car while I was still driving my high school Honda. "We've been discussing your future." Mom jumped in. "You've done so well at the Community College, sweetheart. We're so proud." Ryan nodded along, his arm around Vanessa. Totally, sis. You crushed it. I took a sip of champagne, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dad leaned forward. But your mother and I have been thinking, maybe this is a good time for you to take a gap year. The champagne turned sour in my mouth. A gap year? Why would I do that when I've been accepted to Penn State? I'm supposed to start in September. Well, Mom said, glancing at Dad, with Ryan and Vanessa's wedding coming up, it's going to be an expensive summer for us all. I stared at them, comprehension slowly dawning. What does their wedding have to do with my college? The room fell silent. Ryan suddenly became fascinated with his napkin. Dad cleared his throat again. The thing is, Emma, we've had to make some financial adjustments. The wedding venue required a substantial deposit and… You used my college fund for Ryan's wedding? The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but the looks on their faces confirmed what I'd said. Not all of it, Mom said quickly. Just a portion. How much? I demanded. Another glance between my parents. Dad sighed. We can discuss the details later. The important thing is, how much, Dad? My voice was eerily calm now. About half, he admitted, but we'll replace it. Ryan's getting a bonus at the end of the year, and we'll put that straight into your account. Half. Half of my future gone so my brother could have a fancy wedding at a lake. I looked at Ryan, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. Did you know about this? I asked him. He shifted in his chair. They mentioned they were helping with the costs, but I didn't know where the money was coming from, Em. I swear. Vanessa patted his arm. We're so grateful for your parents' help. The lakeside resort is going to be perfect. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I need some air. Outside on the porch, I unfolded my Penn State acceptance letter. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. 2 more years of education. My dream of becoming a teacher, now hanging by a thread because my brother needed an Instagram-worthy wedding. The screen door creaked behind me. It was Jason, my boyfriend of 3 years, arriving late from his shift at the hospital where he worked as a nurse's aide. Hey, I thought we were meeting. He stopped when he saw my face. What happened? I told him everything, the words spilling out between angry tears. Jason listened, his jaw tightening as I explained what my parents had done. That's messed up, Em, he said finally. What are you going to do? I folded the acceptance letter and put it back in my pocket. First, I need to find out exactly how much they took. Then, I don't know. But even as I said it, I knew this was just the beginning. For years, I'd accepted being second best, being the responsible one while Ryan got all the privileges and none of the expectations. I'd bitten my tongue, played nice, convinced myself that if I just worked hard enough, my parents would finally see me. Not anymore. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. About the years of favoritism and dismissal. About my future. I walked back inside, head held high, to find my family eating as if nothing had happened. They all looked up when I entered, their expressions a mix of guilt and annoyance at having their celebration interrupted. I'm going to the bank tomorrow, I announced. I want to see exactly what's left in my account. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Emma, don't be dramatic. We're all family here. We make sacrifices for each other. Funny, I replied, grabbing my purse. It feels like I'm the only one making sacrifices. Dad stood up. Young lady, that's enough. We've always supported you. Have you? I cut him off. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've always supported Ryan. I'm just the afterthought. Ryan looked pained. Come on, Em, that's not fair. I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Not fair? You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about how I worked 2 jobs through community college while you got a position handed to you at Dad's company. Let's talk about how I've been saving every penny for my education while you're getting a wedding that costs more. than most people's houses. Mom was crying now, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Dad's face had turned red, a vein pulsing in his forehead, the classic Gregory Mitchell about to explode look. "I think you should leave," he said through gritted teeth. "Gladly," I replied, heading for the door. Jason followed silently behind me. In the car, the adrenaline drained from my body, leaving me shaking. Jason put his hand over mine. "What now?" he asked softly. I stared at my childhood home, the lights from the dining room casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Through the window, I could see my family resuming their celebration, their faces already relaxing now that the problem child was gone. "Now," I said, turning the key in the ignition, "I find out exactly what I'm dealing with. And then I make them regret ever touching my future." Little did I know, the next morning at the bank would reveal something far worse than I had imagined, and set in motion a series of events that would change our family forever. Part 2. The Betrayal. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, the kind of spring day that usually filled me with optimism. Not today. Today, I was on a mission. The Oakridge First National Bank was quiet when I arrived, just a few retirees chatting with tellers they'd known for decades. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I approached the customer service desk, where a woman with a kind face and a nameplate reading Margaret greeted me. "How can I help you today?" she asked. "I need to check on an account," I said, pulling out my ID. "It's a college fund set, up by my grandparents. I'm supposed to be the only one with access now that I'm over 21, but I think there might be an issue." Margaret's fingers flew over her keyboard. "What's the account number?" I gave her the information, and her brow furrowed as she stared at her screen. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my stomach clenching. "I'm just checking the transaction history," she said carefully. "There have been several large withdrawals in the past month. How much is left?" She turned the monitor slightly so I could see. "The balance? $0, 0 zeros?" My legs nearly gave out. I gripped the edge of the desk. "That can't be right. There should be over $40,000 in there." "I'm sorry, Ms. Mitchell. According to our records, the account was emptied completely 3 days ago. A cashier's check was issued for the full amount of $43,192.76. "Who authorized that? I didn't sign anything." Margaret clicked through a few more screens. "It appears the withdrawal was authorized by—" She paused, glancing up at me with sympathy. "Deborah Mitchell. She's listed as a co-trustee on the account." My mother, of course. They hadn't just taken half. They'd taken everything. "Can I see the transaction history for the past 6 months?" Margaret printed it out for me, and I scanned the pages with growing horror. What I had assumed was a recent decision, a one-time raid on my college fund, was actually a systematic draining of my account over months. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones, culminating in the final clean-out 3 days ago. Just in time for the down payment on Ryan's wedding venue. I folded the papers and put them in my purse, thanking Margaret for her help. Outside the bank, I sat in my car and called Jason. "They took everything," I told him, my voice surprisingly steady. "Not just half. Every penny." "Jesus, Em, what are you going to do?" I stared at the bank statement on my lap. "I need to talk to Aunt Cynthia." My dad's sister Cynthia had always been the family outlier, the one who spoke her mind regardless of consequences. She'd moved to Philadelphia years ago after a falling out with my dad, but we'd stayed in touch through occasional phone calls and social media. If anyone knew the unvarnished truth about my family, it would be her. I drove straight to the Daily Grind, the coffee shop where I'd arranged to meet her. Aunt Cynthia was already there when I arrived, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a messy bun, large sunglasses perched on her nose despite being indoors. She stood when she saw me, wrapping me in a hug that smelled of sandalwood and cigarettes. "Look at you," she said, holding me at arm's length. "The spitting image of your grandmother." We sat down with our coffees, and I wasted no time explaining the situation. Cynthia's expression darkened as I recounted what had happened with my college fund. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," she said when I finished. "But your parents have always played favorites with you kids." "But this is different," I insisted. "This isn't just buying Ryan a nicer Christmas present or giving him a better car. This is my future they've stolen." Cynthia took a long sip of her coffee, studying me over the rim. "You know, you remind me so much of Eleanor, your grandmother. She never let anyone walk all over her either." She set down her cup. "Have you ever wondered why your parents bend over backward for Ryan? Why nothing he does is ever wrong in their eyes?" I shrugged. "Because he's the boy? The firstborn? The future of the Mitchell insurance dynasty?" "It's more than that." Cynthia leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Did you know your parents got married just 2 months after they met?" I frowned. "I thought they dated for years in college." "That's the story they tell," she said with a wry smile. "The truth is, your mother was pregnant with Ryan. Very pregnant. They rushed the wedding, and Ryan came along just 6 weeks later, a premature baby who somehow weighed a very healthy 8 pounds. This wasn't exactly shocking. Plenty of people got married because of pregnancy. So they lied about their timeline. That doesn't explain why they favor him so much." "No, it doesn't," Cynthia agreed. "But there's more to it. Your father wasn't the only man your mother was seeing back then." My coffee turned cold in my hands as Aunt Cynthia continued talking, revealing a family history very different from the one I'd been told. By the time she finished, I understood why she and my father had fallen out, and what I needed to do next. I drove home to my small apartment near campus in a daze, the weight of family secrets pressing down on me. Jason was waiting, his worried face appearing at the window as I pulled up. "What did she say?" he asked as soon as I walked in. I set my purse down and slumped onto the couch. "A lot. More than I was prepared to hear." "About the money?" "About everything." I looked up at him. "Ryan might not be my father's biological son." Jason's eyes widened. "What?" "According to Aunt Cynthia, Mom was seeing someone else right before she got together with Dad. When she found out she was pregnant, she wasn't sure who the father was, but Dad, he was crazy about her apparently, agreed to marry her, raise the baby as his own." "And you think that's why they favor Ryan? Because your dad's overcompensating?" I shook my head. "It's more complicated than that. Mom comes from money, old money, but her parents threatened to cut her off if there was any scandal. So she and Dad created this perfect image. College sweethearts, planned pregnancy after marriage, the whole fantasy. Ryan became the physical proof of their lie." "Do you think Ryan knows?" "No," I said firmly. "And I don't think Dad does. Either, not for sure. But he's always had his suspicions. It's why he's pushed Ryan so hard to be like him. Same job, same hobbies, same everything. He's been trying to make Ryan a Mitchell through sheer force of will." Jason sat beside me, taking my hand. "So what now? Are you going to tell them you know?" I leaned back, thinking of the bank statement in my purse, of years of being second best, of the Penn State acceptance letter that now seemed like a cruel joke. "Not yet," I said finally. "First, I need proof, and then I need a plan." The next morning, I called Penn State to discuss deferring my enrollment. Then I called the financial aid office to see what grants and loans might be available. The answers weren't encouraging. I'd missed most deadlines for the fall semester. While I was still on the phone, another call came through, my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, this time from Ryan. I ignored that one too. After my third call with yet another unhelpful financial aid officer, I checked my messages. Emma, it's Mom. We need to talk about what happened. Your father and I love you very much and we want to explain. Please call us back. Delete. Hey, Em, it's Ryan. Look, I feel terrible about what happened. I had no idea they were using your college money for the wedding. Vanessa and I want to meet with you, maybe help figure something out. Call me, okay? Delete. The third message was from my father. His voice was tight, controlled. Emma, this has gone on long enough. You're making your mother cry. We're having a family dinner Friday night, and I expect you to be there so we can sort this out like adults. 7 o'clock, don't be late. I almost deleted this one too, but stopped myself. A family dinner, everyone in one place, perfect. I spent the next 2 days preparing. First, I drove to Philadelphia, to the law office where my mother's former boyfriend now worked as a partner. Getting in to see Alan Prescott was easier than I expected. I simply told the receptionist I was Deborah Mitchell's daughter and had some family documents that needed his signature. When I walked into his office, I knew immediately that Aunt Cynthia had been telling the truth. Alan Prescott had the same cleft chin as Ryan, the same set to his shoulders. He looked up from his desk, confusion crossing his face. Can I help you? Mr. Prescott, my name is Emma Mitchell. Deborah Mitchell is my mother. His face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. Debbie's daughter? Well, this is a surprise. Please, sit down. I remained standing. I'll be brief. I believe you had a relationship with my mother shortly, before she married my father. He adjusted his tie. That was a long time ago. Yes, 28 years ago. Around the same time, my brother Ryan was conceived. To his credit, Alan Prescott didn't play dumb. He gestured to the chair again, and this time I sat. Does your mother know you're here? He asked. No. And I'd like to keep it that way for now. He studied me for a long moment. What exactly are you looking for, Ms. Mitchell? The truth, and possibly a DNA test. His eyebrows shot up. That's quite a request. My parents just emptied my college fund to pay for Ryan's wedding, I said bluntly. I think I'm entitled to ask for a few answers in return. We talked for nearly an hour. By the time I left, I had everything I needed, including a sealed envelope with a DNA testing kit and a signed affidavit about his relationship with my mother. The second part of my preparation involved visiting my grandmother Eleanor's house. Though she had passed away 3 years ago, the house remained in the family, maintained but unoccupied. I still had a key. In the attic, I found what I was looking for: boxes of family photos, letters, and diaries. I spent hours sifting through them, finding evidence that supported Aunt Cynthia's story. Hastily rescheduled wedding invitations, letters from friends congratulating my mother on her surprise pregnancy, photos where she was clearly pregnant in a wedding dress that had been altered to accommodate her belly. But the real treasure was my grandmother's diary from that year. As I flipped through the pages, one entry made me pause. April 15th, 1995. Debbie told us today she's expecting. Greg seems thrilled, though I wonder if he knows the whole story. She was still seeing that lawyer just weeks ago. I've said nothing, of course, it's not my place. But I've set aside some money for the baby, and another fund for any future children. Debbie has made her choice, and I pray it's the right one for all involved. That future children fund was mine, the one my parents had just emptied. By Friday evening, I was ready. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. I looked at myself in the mirror, hardly recognizing the determined young woman staring back at me. Jason squeezed my shoulder. You sure about this? I nodded. They've left me no choice. Want me to come with you? No, I said, picking up my bag containing all the evidence I'd gathered. This is something I need to do alone. As I drove to my parents' house, I felt remarkably calm. For years, I'd tried to earn their approval, their love, their attention. I'd played by their rules, stayed quiet when Ryan got special treatment, worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Tonight, all of that was going to change. Tonight, I would finally be seen. I pulled into the driveway at precisely 7 o'clock. Through the dining room window, I could see them all already seated. Mom, Dad, Ryan, and Vanessa. The perfect family portrait, just missing the inconvenient daughter. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the front door, ready to reveal the secret that would change everything. The Mitchell family home looked different to me now. As I walked up the stone path to the front door, I saw it not as the warm sanctuary of my childhood, but as a beautiful facade hiding ugly truths. The perfectly manicured lawn, the gleaming windows, the tasteful spring wreath on the door, all carefully maintained appearances, just like my parents' marriage. I knocked instead of using my key. This wasn't my home anymore. I was a visitor now. Dad opened the door, surprise flickering across his face when he saw me standing there formally, clutching my leather portfolio like I was arriving for a business meeting. "Emma," he said, relief evident in his voice. "You came. You asked?" "Me too," I replied simply. He stepped aside to let me in, and I walked past him into the foyer, inhaling the familiar scent of Mom's lavender candles and Dad's aftershave. The dining room was visible through the archway, table set with the good china, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, a vase of fresh flowers as the centerpiece. Mom was placing a basket of warm dinner rolls in the center of the table, while Ryan and Vanessa sat side by side, their heads bent together in conversation. They all looked up when I entered. Mom's face broke into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Emma, sweetheart, I'm so glad you decided to join us." Ryan stood awkwardly. "Hey, Em." Vanessa waved, her enormous engagement ring catching the light. "Hi, Emma." I nodded to them both, then set my portfolio on the sideboard. "Before we sit down, I'd like to know exactly why I'm here." Dad came up behind me, his hand landing heavily on my shoulder. "We're here to clear the air, put all this unpleasantness behind us." "Unpleasantness," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling theft now?" Mom flinched. "Emma, please, let's not start the evening like this." "How should we start it, Mom? Pretending everything's fine? Ignoring the fact that you emptied my college fund without telling me?" Dad's grip on my shoulder tightened. "We made a decision as a family." "No," I cut him off, stepping away from his touch. "You and Mom made a decision. Ryan and Vanessa benefited from it. I wasn't consulted about my own money." "It wasn't just your money," Mom said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "Your father and I contributed to that account too." "So did Grandma Eleanor," I replied. "She specifically set it aside for my education." At the mention of his mother, Dad's expression softened slightly. "Emma, sit down, please. Let's eat and talk this through calmly." I glanced at the table, at the empty chair waiting for me. They wanted everything to go back to normal, for me to fall in line like I always had. For a moment, I was tempted. It would be easier, less painful, to just let it go. But then I thought of Penn State, of my dorm room I'd never see, of the teaching degree slipping away from me. I thought of years of feeling second best, of watching Ryan get everything while I got the leftovers of my parents' attention and resources. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not hungry." Ryan stood up. "Come on, Em, we can figure this out together. Vanessa and I have been talking and we're willing to scale back some of the wedding plans, maybe free up some money to help you." "How generous," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Considering it's my money, you're scaling back on spending." Vanessa's smile faltered. "We just want to help." "If you want to help, Cancel the lakeside resort and get married at the courthouse. That would free up plenty of money. She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. Ryan's face darkened. That's not fair, Emma. This isn't Vanessa's fault. You're right, I agreed. It's not her fault. It's not even your fault, Ryan. I turned to face my parents. It's theirs. Mom's hands were trembling slightly as she arranged a napkin on her lap. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this. We've always supported you, Emma. Have you? I walked to the sideboard and opened my portfolio. Let's talk about support, Mom. Let's talk about how you and Dad have always put Ryan first in everything. Dad's face reddened. That's not true. Isn't it? I pulled out the first document, my bank statement. You didn't just take half of my college fund like you claimed. You took all of it. $43,892.76. I laid the paper on the table where everyone could see it. Mom paled. We were going to tell you. When? After I showed up at Penn State and discovered I couldn't pay tuition? We would have figured something out, Dad insisted. Ryan's bonus is months away and nowhere near enough. I finished. For him. You knew that. You knew exactly what you were doing. Ryan was staring at the bank statement, genuine shock on his face. Mom, Dad, you said it was just part of the fund. Dad shifted uncomfortably. The wedding venue required a larger deposit than we expected. And my education required exactly what Grandma Eleanor set aside, I countered. But you decided Ryan's wedding was more important. It wasn't like that, Mom protested. We were just trying to make sure Ryan and Vanessa had the perfect start to their marriage. While ensuring I couldn't finish college, I added. The room fell silent. I could see them struggling to find justifications, the same way they always did when their favoritism toward Ryan became too obvious to ignore. Finally, Dad sighed heavily. Emma, what do you want from us? An apology? Fine, we're sorry. We should have discussed it with you first. You should never have touched it at all, I corrected him. But an apology isn't enough anymore. Then what do you want? Mom asked, an edge creeping into her voice. Money? We've told you as soon as we can. I want the truth, I interrupted. The whole truth, for once in this family. What are you talking about? Dad frowned. I pulled out my second piece of evidence, a photocopy of Grandma Eleanor's diary. Entry. I visited Grandma's house yesterday, found some interesting reading in the attic. Mom's face drained of color as I placed the diary page on the table. Where did you get that? Like I said, Grandma's house. She kept diaries her whole life, did you know that? Documented everything including the real timeline of your relationship, Mom? Dad reached for the paper, scanning it quickly. His expression remained unreadable, but I noticed how his jaw tightened, the same way it did when he was processing bad news about an insurance claim. What is this supposed to prove? He asked, his voice unnaturally calm. That Mom was already pregnant with Ryan when you got married? That she'd been seeing someone else just before you? That Grandma Eleanor suspected Ryan might not be? That's enough! Dad slammed his hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Emma, but this is crossing a line. Ryan looked bewildered, his gaze darting between our parents. What is she talking about? Mom was gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Nothing. She's upset about the money and trying to hurt us. I'm trying to get answers, I corrected her. About why Ryan has always been the favorite child. Why nothing he does is ever wrong. Why he gets everything handed to him while I have to fight for scraps of your attention. That's absurd, Dad scoffed, but his eyes never met mine. Is it? I pulled out my third piece of evidence, a manila envelope. I went to see Alan Prescott yesterday. The glass Mom was lifting to her lips slipped from her grasp, shattering on the hardwood floor. No one moved to clean it up. You what? She whispered. Alan Prescott, I repeated. Your old boyfriend, the one you were still seeing weeks before. You suddenly decided to marry Dad." Ryan stood up so abruptly his chair tipped over backward. "What the hell is going on?" Dad hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on the manila envelope in my hands. "Emma, whatever you think you know, I know Mom was dating 2 men at once," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around me. "I know she got pregnant and wasn't sure who the father was. I know she chose you, Dad, because the Mitchells had money and respectability, and Alan was just a law student then." "That's not true!" Mom cried, tears streaming down her face. "Greg, tell her it's not true." "But—" Dad said nothing, his silence more damning than any denial could have been. Vanessa looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. Ryan's face had gone from confused to horrified. "Mom?" he said, his voice suddenly childlike. "Dad? What is she saying?" I opened the manila envelope and pulled out Alan Prescott's signed affidavit, placing it gently on the table. "Mr. Prescott remembers everything, Mom. He was quite forthcoming about your relationship and how suddenly it ended when you discovered you were pregnant." Mom buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Dad finally looked up, his face ashen. "You had no right to dig into this, Emma. No right at all." "And you had no right to take my future away," I countered. "My entire life, I've watched you worship the ground Ryan walks on while treating me like an afterthought. Now I understand why." "That's not why," Dad said, his voice barely audible. "Then explain it to me," I challenged him. "Explain why Ryan gets everything and I get nothing." "Because I chose him," Dad exploded, rising to his feet. "I chose to be his father when I didn't have to. I stood by your mother, gave her child my name, my home, my life. Do you have any idea what that cost me? The doubt, the wondering every time I looked at him?" The room fell completely silent. Ryan staggered back as if physically struck. "Dad," he whispered. Dad seemed to suddenly realize what he'd admitted. He reached toward Ryan. "Son, I didn't mean—" "Don't touch me," Ryan snapped, backing away. All my life, you pushed me to be just like you. The same school, the same job, the same everything. Was that just to convince yourself I was yours?" "You are mine," Dad insisted, but the damage was done. Vanessa stood up, grabbing her purse. "I think I should go." "Vanessa, wait." Ryan started. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said quickly before hurrying out of the dining room. The front door closed quietly behind her a moment later. Mom raised her tear-streaked face. "Ryan, please, you have to understand. It was complicated back then." "Complicated?" Ryan laughed bitterly. "You lied to me my entire life, both of you." He turned to me, his expression accusatory. "And you decided to blow it all up because of money?" "Not because of money," I corrected him. "Because of fairness. Because they emptied my college fund for your wedding while hiding the truth from both of us." "So this is revenge?" he demanded. "This is me refusing to be the family scapegoat anymore." Ryan shook his head in disgust. "You know what? Have the wedding money, all of it. I don't want it." He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. "In fact, I don't want any of this. I don't even know who I am anymore." "Ryan, please," Mom begged, reaching for him. He jerked away from her touch. "Don't. Just don't." And then he was gone too, the front door slamming behind him. My parents stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and grief. "Are you happy now?" Dad asked, his voice hollow. "You've destroyed your brother." "You did that," I replied quietly. "You and Mom, with every lie, every secret, every time you made him the golden child to compensate for your guilt." "You have no idea what you've done," Mom whispered. I gathered my evidence back into my portfolio. I know exactly what I've done. I've exposed the truth you've been hiding for 28 years. And what about your education? Dad asked bitterly. Was it worth it, Emma? Trading your college fund for this moment of revenge? I met his gaze steadily. I'll figure out my education. I always do. But I'm done being the daughter you take for granted. I turned to leave, but Mom's voice stopped me. If you walk out that door, she said, her voice shaking with emotion, don't expect us to welcome you back. I paused, feeling a momentary flash of uncertainty. Despite everything, these were my parents. This was the only family I'd ever known. But then I thought of the empty bank account, of years of feeling invisible in my own home, of the relief on Ryan's face every time he realized he'd escaped consequences for something I would have been punished for. Goodbye, Mom, I said softly. Goodbye, Dad. I walked out of the house, closing the door gently behind me. The spring air felt fresh against my tear-streaked face. In my car, I sat for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, waiting for regret to hit me. It didn't come. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. The truth was finally out, for better or worse. I didn't have to pretend anymore, didn't have to compete for scraps of attention, didn't have to watch Ryan get preferential treatment while I stood in the shadows. I started the car and drove away from my childhood home, not looking back. Jason was waiting at my apartment, pacing anxiously, his face filled with concern when he saw me. How did it go? He asked, pulling me into a hug. Exactly. As expected, I replied, my voice muffled against his shoulder. Nuclear. I told him everything. The stunned looks, the shattered glass, the shouting, Ryan storming out, my parents' ultimatum. Jason listened without interrupting, his arm around me on the couch. So what happens now? He asked when I finished. I don't know, I admitted. I just blew up my entire family. I probably won't be invited to Ryan's wedding, if there even is a wedding after this. Do you regret it? I considered the question carefully. I regret that it had to come to this. I regret that my parents left me no choice. But I don't. Regret standing up for myself, finally. He squeezed my shoulder. And what about Penn State? One problem at a time, I sighed. I've got some money saved from work. Maybe I can get a loan or more scholarships. I'll figure it out. But even as I said it, I knew the path forward wouldn't be easy. Without my college fund, without my parents' support, the road to my teaching degree had just gotten much steeper. Jason kissed the top of my head. Whatever happens, I'm here. We'll figure it out together. I leaned against him, exhausted, but strangely at peace. The truth was out. The secrets were exposed. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe freely, even if I wasn't sure what came next. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. We need to talk. Meet me at Riverside Park tomorrow, 10 a.m., just you. I showed it to Jason, who frowned. Are you going to go? Yes, I said without hesitation. He deserves that much. The next morning dawned cool and overcast, the gray sky matching my mood as I drove to Riverside Park. This had been our childhood playground, where Ryan had taught me to ride a bike, where we'd fed ducks and built snowmen and carved our initials, into the old oak tree by the water, before the favoritism had become obvious, before the distance had grown between us, before I'd shattered the foundation of his identity with the truth about our parents. I found him sitting on a bench overlooking the river, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees, looking like he hadn't slept all night. When he saw me approaching, he straightened up but didn't smile. Thanks for coming, he said as I sat beside him, leaving enough space between us for our new reality. How are you? I asked. He laughed mirthlessly. How do you think? I just found out my entire life might be a lie. That the man I thought was my father might not be. That my mother lied to both of us. I'm sorry it came out like that, I said, and I meant it. I never wanted to hurt you, Ryan. Just Mom and Dad. Right? His voice was bitter. I wanted them to face the consequences of their actions. Yes. He stared out at the river for a long moment. I called off the wedding. What? Ryan? No. Vanessa deserves better than this mess. He cut me off. Better than a groom who doesn't even know who he is anymore. You're still you, I said gently. Nothing's changed about who you are as a person. Everything's changed, Emma. He turned to look at me, his eyes bloodshot from crying or lack of sleep. Maybe both. Did you know I've been working on a surprise for you? I was going to announce it at the rehearsal dinner that Vanessa and I were going to use half of our wedding gift money to replace what Mom and Dad took from your college fund. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Ryan, but I guess that doesn't matter. Now does it? Because you've decided I'm the enemy. That I've had this perfect life at your expense. That's not... You think I don't know they favor me? He continued, his voice rising. You think I haven't seen it my whole life, the way they let me get away with things they'd punish you for. The way they push me to succeed while barely noticing your accomplishments? I stared at him, speechless. I've spent years trying to make it up to you, Em. Covering for you when you missed curfew. Talking them into letting you go on that school trip they thought was too expensive. Convincing Dad that community college was a smart financial choice, not a step down. I didn't know, I whispered. Because you decided I was the villain in your story, he said wearily. The golden child who could do no wrong. Shame washed over me. Had I been so focused on being the victim that I'd missed Ryan trying to be my ally? I'm sorry, I said, the words inadequate for the moment. He sighed, deflating slightly. I get why you did it. I do. What they did with your college fund was wrong. But did you have to burn everything down to make your point? I had no answer for that. In my determination to expose the truth, I hadn't stopped to consider all the casualties, including my relationship with my brother. What did Mom and Dad say after I left? Ryan asked. Not much. Mom said not to come back if I walked out. He nodded as if this confirmed something. They've been calling me non-stop. Dad left about 20 messages swearing I'm his son, that it doesn't matter what a DNA test might say. Mom just keeps crying. Are you going to take a test? I asked cautiously. Ryan looked down at his hands. I don't know. Part of me wants the truth. Part of me is terrified of it. Whatever you decide, it won't change who you are to me, I said softly. You're still my brother. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something shift in his expression. Even after everything? Even after everything. We sat in silence for a while, watching the river flow past, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Ryan spoke again. So what happens now? With college, I mean. I shrugged. I'll figure something out. I always do. I still have the money from canceling the venue deposit, he said. It's not all of what they took, but it's a start. I turned to him, surprised. Ryan, I can't take your money. It's not my money, he corrected me. It's your money. Always was. But your wedding can wait. If Vanessa and I get through this, we'll have a smaller ceremony. Something we can actually afford. I felt tears welling up. Why would you help me after what I did? He sighed heavily. Because we're family, Em. Real family. Not the fake version Mom and Dad created, but you and me against the world, like when we were kids. I remembered those days, before the favoritism had become so obvious, when Ryan was just my big brother who taught me to ride a bike and scared away the monsters under my bed. I've missed that, I admitted. Me too. He hesitated, then asked, Do you think we can get back to that, after everything? I thought about it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, not for any of us. There would be difficult conversations, painful truths, relationships to rebuild or let go. I think we can try, I said finally. Ryan nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I'd like that. As we sat there by the river, I realized that the family secret I'd exposed had destroyed one version of our family, but might have created space for a more honest one to emerge. Ryan and I had a chance to build a real relationship, based on truth rather than the roles our parents had assigned us. It wasn't the outcome I'd expected when I'd walked into my parents' house with my evidence and anger. But maybe, just maybe, it was the one we all needed. The future was uncertain. My education, Ryan's paternity, our relationships with our parents. But for the first time in years, I felt like Ryan and I were on the same side again. And that, at least, felt like a beginning rather than an end. 3 days after my conversation with Ryan at Riverside Park, I woke to a series of text messages from Vanessa. She wanted to meet for coffee, just the two of us. I stared at my phone, unsure how to respond. Vanessa and I had never been close. She'd always felt more like an extension of Ryan's golden child status than a person in her own. Right, but something in her messages seemed genuine. I need to understand what happened, she'd written. Not just for Ryan, but for me. I agreed to meet her at the Daily Grind that afternoon. The coffee shop was busy with the lunchtime crowd when I arrived. Vanessa was already there, seated at a corner table away from the windows, wearing large sunglasses despite being indoors. When she saw me, she slipped them off, revealing red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." Honestly, I wasn't sure either, I admitted. A barista brought over 2 cups of coffee. Vanessa must have ordered for me. I took a sip, surprised to find it prepared exactly how I liked it. 1 sugar, splash of almond, milk. "Ryan told me how you take it," she explained, noticing my expression. "Thanks." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "So, you and Ryan are talking?" She nodded. "We're figuring things out. The wedding's off, as you probably know, but we're still together, trying to work through this." "I'm sorry about the wedding," I said, and found that I meant it. "That wasn't my intention." Vanessa studied me for a moment. "What was your intention? Emma? To hurt your parents? To hurt Ryan?" I took another sip of coffee, considering my answer. To be honest, I'm not sure I thought that far ahead. I just wanted them to face the truth for once. The truth about Ryan's father? That and the fact that they've always favored him over me. That they stole my future to give him a perfect wedding. Vanessa flinched slightly. "I didn't know about the money, Emma. Not the full amount anyway. Your parents told us they were contributing, but Ryan and I assumed it was coming from their savings. Would it have mattered if you'd known?" She looked down at her coffee. "I'd like to think so. My parents don't have much, you know. My dad's a high school teacher. My mom works at the library. When your parents offered to pay for Lakeside, it seemed like a dream come true." I softened. Slightly. I'd always assumed Vanessa was just another person benefiting from my parents' preferential treatment of Ryan, but perhaps she'd been caught in the middle too. "Ryan said he offered you the venue deposit," she continued. "He did. I told him I couldn't take it." "But you should," Vanessa insisted. "It's your money. We should never have accepted it in the first place." I shook my head. It would be different if the money had come from my parents' account, but they took it from my college fund, money my grandmother set aside specifically for my education. I understand that now. Vanessa twisted her engagement ring, still on her finger despite the canceled wedding. "That's actually why I wanted to meet with you. I have a proposition." I raised my eyebrows. "What kind of proposition?" "I work at Morgan Financial, as you know. We have a scholarship program for employees and their families. The application deadline was last month. But I spoke with HR, explained the situation. They've agreed to let you apply late. I stared at her, shocked. Why would you do that for me? Because it's the right thing to do, she said simply. And because despite everything, Ryan loves you. He's heartbroken about what happened with your parents, but he's even more upset about possibly losing his relationship with you. I swallowed, hard, unexpected emotion rising in my throat. I don't know what to say. Say you'll apply. Vanessa pushed a folder across the table. It won't cover everything, but combined with the venue deposit and whatever else you can pull together, it might be enough to get you through the first year at Penn State. I opened the folder, scanning the application materials. It was a legitimate opportunity, one I wouldn't have known about without Vanessa's help. Thank you, I said, closing the folder. Really? She nodded, then hesitated before asking, Have you spoken to your parents since that night? No. You? Once. Your mom called crying, begging me to convince Ryan to answer his phone. Vanessa sighed. It was uncomfortable. I can imagine. Ryan's struggling, Emma. Not just with the paternity question, but with everything. He thought he knew about his life. He's angry, confused. And I did that to him, I finished for her. Yes, she said bluntly. But your parents set it all in motion years ago. Ryan understands that. We sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the coffee shop washing over us. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me since our conversation at Riverside Park. Do you think he'll take the DNA test? Vanessa twisted her ring again. I don't know. Part of him wants clarity, but part of him is terrified of what he might find out. We've talked about what it would mean either way. She trailed off, then looked at me directly. What about you? Are you going to reconcile with your parents? I shook my head. I can't see how. They made their choice, repeatedly chose Ryan over me. Then they stole my future and told me not to come back when I called them on it. People say things they don't mean when they're hurt, Vanessa observed. This goes beyond hurt feelings. I countered. This is about a lifetime of being treated like I matter less. About having the one thing that was meant to be mine, my education fund, taken away without even consulting me. I'm not defending what they did, Vanessa clarified. I'm just saying. Families are complicated, and permanent estrangement is a heavy thing to live with. So is betrayal, I replied. We finished our coffee in contemplative silence. As we were preparing to leave, Vanessa hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. I almost forgot. Ryan wanted me to give you this. I opened the box to find a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm, a miniature bicycle. He said you'd understand, Vanessa added. My throat tightened. When I was 7, I'd fallen off my bike and scraped my knee badly. Ryan, 12 at the time, had carried me all the way home on his back, promising to teach me to ride. Better so I wouldn't fall again. And he had, spending hours running alongside my bike until I could ride confidently on my own. Before the favoritism had become impossible to ignore. Before we'd grown apart. When he was just my big brother who looked out for me. Tell him. I swallowed hard. Tell him I remember. Vanessa nodded, a small smile touching her lips. I will. As I walked home from the coffee shop, the scholarship application in one hand and Ryan's bracelet in the other, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not for reconciliation with my parents, perhaps, but for a path forward with my education and a new relationship with my brother. The next week passed in a blur of activity. I filled out the scholarship application Vanessa had provided, gathered recommendation letters from my community college professors, and researched additional financial aid options. Jason helped me draft essay after essay, proofread applications, and calculate budgets late into the night. What if none of this works out? I asked him one evening as we sat surrounded by paperwork on my apartment floor. What if I can't afford Penn State even with the scholarship and Ryan's deposit? Jason looked up from the FAFSA form he was reviewing. Then we come up with a plan B. Maybe you defer for a semester while you save more. Maybe you find a cheaper state school. Maybe you look into online options. But my dream has always been Penn State. I know, he said gently, and we're doing everything we can to make that happen. But your dream is teaching, Em. Penn State is just one path to get there. He was right, of course. I'd been so fixated on the specific route my life was supposed to take that I'd forgotten to focus on the destination. Still, I submitted my completed scholarship application to Vanessa the following day, with a mixture of hope and trepidation. It was a long shot, especially as a late applicant, but it was a chance. 2 days later, as I was leaving my shift at the bookstore, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Emma Mitchell? A crisp female voice asked when I answered. Yes, this is she. This is Diane Mercer from the financial aid office at Penn State. I'm calling about your enrollment for the fall semester. My heart sank. This was it, the official notification that I couldn't attend because of insufficient funds. Yes, I managed. We've received some unusual communications regarding your account that I wanted to discuss with you directly. I frowned. What kind of communications? Well, Ms. Mercer continued, this morning we received a wire transfer in the amount of $43,892.76, designated specifically for your tuition and expenses. I nearly dropped my phone. I'm sorry, what? A wire transfer, she repeated. The full amount needed to cover your first year's tuition, room and board, and estimated expenses. It was accompanied by a letter stating that this payment was to replace funds that had been inappropriately diverted from your college account. My mind raced. Ryan had mentioned returning the venue deposit, but that wouldn't have been anywhere near $43,000. Who sent it? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The transfer came from Gregory and Deborah Mitchell, Ms. Mercer said, confirming my suspicion. Are they relatives of yours? They're my parents, I said faintly. I see. Her tone softened slightly. Well, I wanted to confirm that we should apply these funds to your account. With this payment, you're fully covered for the upcoming fall semester. Yes, I said automatically. Yes, please apply the funds. After finishing the call, I stood frozen outside the bookstore trying to process what had just happened. My parents had returned the money. All of it. Not just what Ryan had recovered from the venue deposit, but the entire amount they'd taken. From my college fund. What did it mean? Was this an attempt at reconciliation, or just a way to assuage their guilt? And where had they gotten the money? The Lakeside Resort deposit wouldn't have covered half that amount. I was still standing there when my phone rang again. Ryan this time. Did you hear? He asked as soon as I answered. About the money? Yes. The financial aid office just called me. They sold Dad's boat, Ryan said, and Mom's diamond earrings, the ones Grandma Eleanor gave her, and they took out a second mortgage on the house. I sat down heavily on a nearby bench. Why would they do that? To make things right, I guess. As right as they can, anyway. Have you been talking to them? Ryan sighed. A little. Not about the paternity thing. Neither of us is ready for that conversation yet. But about what they did to you? Yeah, we've talked. And I made it clear that what they did was wrong. That if they want any kind of relationship with me going forward, they needed to fix what they'd done to you first. I felt a rush of warmth toward my brother. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, he said firmly. You're my sister, Em. No matter what a DNA test might say about Dad and me, that will never change. Tears pricked my eyes. Thank you. So what happens now? Ryan asked. Will you talk to them? I hesitated. I don't know. Returning the money doesn't erase all those years of favoritism, of making me feel like I mattered less. No, it doesn't, Ryan agreed. And I'm not saying you should forgive and forget. Just maybe hear them out? I'll think about it, I promised, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. After we hung up, I walked slowly back to my apartment, my mind swimming with conflicting emotions. My parents had returned my college money. More than that, they'd made significant personal sacrifices to do so. It didn't undo the hurt or the betrayal, but it was something. Jason was surprised when I told him the news. They actually replaced the entire amount? He asked, eyes wide. I nodded. According to Ryan, they sold Dad's precious boat and Mom's inheritance jewelry, plus took out a second mortgage. Wow. Jason whistled low. That's not nothing. No, it's not, I agreed. Are you going to call them? I sank onto the couch beside him. I don't know. Part of me wants to. They're still my parents, despite everything. But another part thinks some damage can't be undone with money. No matter how grand the gesture. Jason put his arm around me. You don't have to decide right now. Take some time, think it through. That's the thing, I said, leaning against him. I've been thinking through my relationship with my parents. My entire life, analyzing every interaction, wondering why I never measured up to Ryan in their eyes. I'm tired of thinking about it. Then maybe it's time to act instead, Jason suggested. Either close that door for good, or open it enough to hear what they have to say. The next morning, I woke early, my mind made up. If my parents could take such dramatic steps to make financial amends, the least I could do was listen to what they had to say. Not for their sake, but for mine. So I could move forward, one way or another, without this weight hanging over me. I texted Ryan first. I'm ready to talk to Mom and Dad. Can you arrange it? His response came quickly. They're at Grandma Eleanor's house. Said they'd be there all day if you want to come by. Grandma Eleanor's house, neutral territory, filled with memories that predated the worst of the family drama. It was a deliberate choice on their part, I realized, and a good one. I dressed carefully in jeans and a simple blue sweater, Grandma's favorite color. As I drove the familiar route to her craftsman-style home on the edge of town, I tried to prepare myself for what was to come. No matter what my parents said, I wouldn't let myself be pulled back into old patterns. This conversation was about clearing the air, not about returning to the way things were. The house looked the same as it always had, meticulously maintained, even though Grandma had been gone for 3 years. The garden was blooming with spring flowers, and the porch swing moved gently in the breeze. For a moment, I could almost imagine Grandma sitting there, waiting to greet me with her warm smile and no-nonsense advice. You're stronger than you think, Emma Bean, she used to tell me. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. Mom opened it, her face lighting up with cautious hope when she saw me. She looked different, older somehow, with new lines around her eyes and mouth that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. Emma, she said softly, you came. Ryan said you'd be here, I replied, not quite ready for warmth. She stepped back to let me in. Your father's in the living room. I walked through the familiar hallway, past Grandma's collection of antique teacups and the gallery wall of family photos. Dad was standing by the fireplace, looking as uncomfortable as I'd ever seen him. When he saw me, he straightened up, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Emma, he said, his voice rough. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. I sat in Grandma's favorite armchair, feeling her presence all around us. Mom perched on the edge of the sofa. We got confirmation that the money was received by Penn State. Yes, I said. They called me yesterday. Good, Dad nodded. That's good. An awkward silence fell. I could see them struggling with what to say next, how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. Emma, what we did was wrong. Taking your college money without asking, it was unforgivable. Yes, it was, I agreed, not making it easier for him. We've been trying to understand why we did it, Mom continued. Not to excuse it, but to explain. To ourselves as much as to you. I waited, curious despite myself. Dad ran a hand through his thinning hair. The truth is, we've been treating Ryan differently his entire life. Not just giving him more, but expecting less, making excuses, cleaning up his messes. Because you're not sure he's your biological son, I stated bluntly. Dad flinched but nodded. That uncertainty. It changed how I saw him from the very beginning. I overcompensated, trying to make him mine through sheer force of will, and, in the process, you pushed me aside, I finished for him. We failed you, Mom said, tears welling in her eyes, over and over again. The college fund was just the final straw. I felt a twinge of emotion but pushed it down. Why? Why take that money when you knew how important it was to me? Mom and Dad exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. We've been having financial problems, Dad admitted finally. The business hasn't been doing well for years. I've been too proud to admit it, too stubborn to change course. We remortgaged the house twice before the one we just took out. Maxed out credit cards. When Ryan announced his engagement and wanted this extravagant wedding. You could have said no, I pointed out. You could have told him the truth about your finances. We could have, Dad agreed. We should have. But we'd spent so many years creating this perfect image. Successful business, perfect family, golden son following in my footsteps. The more our real life diverged from that image, the more desperately we clung to it, Mom added. When Ryan wanted Lakeside, we convinced ourselves it was an investment in his happiness, that your college fund was just sitting there and we'd replace it before you needed it. But you knew I'd be transferring to Penn State this fall, I said. We'd talked about it for years. We weren't thinking clearly, Dad admitted. We told ourselves we'd figure it out somehow, that Ryan's happiness had to come first, just this once. Just this once? I repeated incredulously. His happiness has always come first. Mom nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. You're right. We see that now, in a way we couldn't, or wouldn't, before. Selling the boat and Mom's jewelry, taking out another mortgage. None of that erases what we did, Dad said. But we want you to know that we're finally facing reality. About our finances, about how we've treated you, about everything. I studied them both, these people who had shaped my entire life, for better and worse. They looked diminished somehow, sitting in Grandma Eleanor's living room with their failures laid bare. Have you talked to Ryan about his paternity? I asked. Dad's jaw tightened. Not yet. He's not ready, and honestly, neither am I. Will you take a DNA test? If Ryan wants me to, yes, Dad said, though I could see the fear in his eyes. Whatever the results, he's my son. He always will be. Mom reached for Dad's hand. We've made so many mistakes, Emma. But losing you, that would be our biggest regret. I felt a knot in my throat. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. We understand, Dad said quickly. We're not asking for that today. What are you asking for then? Mom and Dad exchanged another look. A chance, Mom said simply. A chance to show you that we can change, that we see our mistakes and want to do better. We know we don't deserve it, Dad added, but we're asking anyway. I looked around Grandma Eleanor's living room at the photos of our family through the years. There I was as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, Ryan's arm around my shoulders as we stood in front of this very fireplace at Christmas. There were my parents on their 25th anniversary, looking into each other's eyes with genuine love. There was Grandma herself, stern but kind-eyed, watching over us all. What would she advise me to do now? I thought of Ryan, trying to rebuild his own relationship with our parents while grappling with questions about his identity. Of Vanessa, extending an olive branch despite the chaos I'd brought to her life. Of Jason, supporting me through every decision without pushing me in any particular direction. And I thought of myself, what I needed, what I wanted, what would allow me to move forward with my life. I can't promise anything, I said finally, but I'm willing to try family counseling. All four of us, you, me, and Ryan. The relief on their faces was palpable. Anything, Mom said. Whatever you need. I need honesty, I told them. Complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more lies, no more pretending we're something we're not. Dad nodded solemnly. You have our word. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the conversation. I should go. I have a lot to process. Of course, Mom said, rising quickly. Thank you for coming, Emma, for giving us a chance to explain. As they walked me to the door, Dad hesitated, then asked, Will you let us know when you start at Penn State? Maybe we could help you move in? A week ago, I would have rejected the offer outright. But now, standing in Grandma Eleanor's house with the first fragile thread of a new relationship forming, I found myself nodding. I'll let you know, I promised. Outside, the spring air felt cleansing. I stood on Grandma's porch for a moment, looking out at the garden she'd tended so carefully. I couldn't help wondering what she would think of all this. The secrets, the confrontation, the tentative steps toward reconciliation. I liked to think she would approve of my standing up. For myself, of demanding the truth, of refusing to accept less than I deserved. But I also believed she would understand the choice I was making now. To leave the door open, just a crack, to whatever might come next. As I drove away from Grandma Eleanor's house, I felt lighter somehow. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, not by a long shot, but because for the first time in my life, I was setting the terms of my relationship with my parents. I wasn't the afterthought, the second choice. The one who had to accept whatever scraps of attention came my way. I was Emma Mitchell, future teacher, Penn State student, a young woman charting her own course. And whatever happened with my family going forward, I would face it on my own terms. August arrived with a heat wave that shimmered over Oakridge like a fever dream. The town felt smaller now, as if my confrontation with my family had somehow shrunk the space we all occupied. I found myself taking detours to avoid driving past my parents' house or the insurance office where Ryan and my father worked. It wasn't that I was hiding, exactly. More that I needed the distance to think clearly about what came next. The first family counseling session was scheduled for the following week. I'd found a therapist who specialized in family estrangement and secrets, Dr. Amelia Chen, who had agreed to see all four of us, me, Ryan, Mom, and Dad. The appointment sat on my calendar like a ticking clock, both dreaded and necessary. In the meantime, I had practical matters to attend to. Penn State's fall semester would begin in just 3 weeks, and I had a dorm room to prepare for, textbooks to order, and a life to pack up. The money my parents had returned covered tuition, room and board, and basic expenses, but there were still gaps in my budget. I'd picked up extra shifts at the bookstore, saving every penny. That was where I was, restocking the fiction section, on a slow Tuesday afternoon, when Aunt Cynthia appeared at the end of the aisle, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual messy bun. "There's my favorite niece," she announced as if we'd planned to meet. I nearly dropped the stack of novels I was shelving. "Aunt Cynthia, what are you doing here?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Can't an aunt visit her niece without an interrogation? When do you get off work?" I glanced at my watch. Another hour, but I have a lot to do after. Perfect, I'll wait. We're having dinner. Before I could protest, she wandered off toward the cafe section of the bookstore, leaving me to finish. My shift with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Aunt Cynthia had been my ally in uncovering the family secret, but we hadn't spoken since that explosive dinner. I wasn't sure what to expect from her now. When my shift ended, I found her sipping a latte and reading a dog-eared paperback. "Ready?" she asked, snapping the book shut. "I guess. Where are we going?" "Lucille's. I've been craving their clam chowder for months." Lucille's was a local institution, a waterfront restaurant that had been serving the best seafood in Oakridge for 3 generations. It was also, I couldn't help noting, where my parents had celebrated their anniversary every year. We drove separately, meeting in the restaurant's parking lot. The dinner rush hadn't started yet, so we were seated immediately at a window table, overlooking the river. "So," Aunt Cynthia said after we'd ordered, "I hear you're heading to Penn State soon." "News travels fast," I observed. She smiled wryly. "Small towns, that, and I've been talking to Ryan." I raised my eyebrows. "You and Ryan are talking now? I thought you two weren't close." "We weren't. But apparently blowing up family secrets creates strange bedfellows." She buttered a piece of bread thoughtfully. He needed someone to talk to who understands the Mitchell family dysfunction firsthand. "And you volunteered for that job?" "More like got drafted, but it's been good, actually. He reminds me a lot of Greg at that age, before he became so." "Dad-like?" I suggested. "Precisely." She nodded. "Ryan told me you're all doing family therapy next week." I sipped my water, unsure how much I wanted to share. "We're trying. I don't know if it will work, but it felt like the right next step." "Brave of you," Aunt Cynthia said, surprising me. "I never had the courage to sit in a room with your father and hash things out properly. Just cut and run to Philadelphia." "Do you regret that?" She considered the question. "Sometimes family is complicated. You can love people deeply and still need to protect yourself from them." Our food arrived. Clam chowder for Aunt Cynthia, grilled salmon for me. We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before she spoke again. "I want to show you something." She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "If it's more evidence against my parents, I'm not sure I need it right now," I said cautiously. "It's not that." She slid the envelope across the table. "It's something your grandmother wanted you to have when the time was right. I think that time is now." I opened the envelope with hesitant fingers. Inside was a legal document, a trust agreement. My eyes scanned the formal language, widening when I reached the key details. "This is a separate trust fund? In my name?" Aunt Cynthia nodded. "Eleanor set it up when you were born. Only she and I knew about it. She made me the trustee, with instructions not to tell you until you were either 25 or needed to know you were valued, whichever came first." I stared at the document, noting the amount, $75,000, now closer to $100,000 with accumulated interest. "Why didn't you tell me about this when I first came to you? When I found out about my college fund being emptied?" Aunt Cynthia's expression turned sheepish. "I should have, but I was so focused on exposing Debbie and Greg's lies that I didn't think about the positive truths I could share instead." She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. "I'm sorry for that, Emma. I let my own resentments color how I helped you." I sat back, processing this revelation. "So Grandma knew? About how they treated me compared to Ryan?" "Eleanor saw everything," Aunt Cynthia confirmed. "She loved you both, but she recognized the pattern early. That's why she set up separate funds for each of you, and why she created this additional trust just for you." I thought of my grandmother, her sharp eyes that never missed anything, her quiet way of evening the scales when she could. Why didn't she ever say anything to Mom and Dad? She tried, in her way, but Eleanor was from a generation that didn't confront things directly. She believed in practical solutions more than emotional confrontations. Like secret trust funds, I murmured. Exactly. Aunt Cynthia smiled sadly. The money becomes fully available to you on your 25th birthday, or upon completion of your undergraduate degree, whichever comes first. But as trustee, I can authorize distributions for educational expenses now, if you need them. Push the document back toward her. I don't. Mom and Dad replaced my college fund. I heard. She nodded approvingly. That was a start. But this money isn't about replacing what they took, Emma. It's about giving you options they can't control. It's about having a safety net that belongs only to you. I considered her words. The money my parents had returned came with invisible strings, an implicit expectation of forgiveness, of family reconciliation on their timeline. This trust from Grandma Eleanor felt different, a gift with no expectations attached. Thank you for telling me, I said finally, and for keeping it safe all these years. There's more. Aunt Cynthia pulled another envelope from her purse. A letter Eleanor wrote to you before she died. She asked me to give it to you along with the trust information. This envelope was smaller, cream-colored, with my name written in Grandma's careful handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer here, and Cynthia has determined that the time is right for you to know about the provisions I've made for your future. I've always seen something special in you, a quiet strength that reminds me of myself at your age. I've watched you grow up in your brother's shadow, always trying a little harder, always receiving a little less in return. It hasn't escaped my notice, and it hasn't been fair. While I love your parents deeply, they have their blind spots, as we all do. This money is yours, with no conditions attached. Use it to build the life you want, not the one others expect of you. Education, travel, a home of your own, whatever path you choose, I want you to walk it freely, without the constraints that financial dependence can place upon us. Remember that your worth has never been determined by how others see you, but by who you are and what you contribute to this world. You have always been enough, exactly as you are. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. I could almost hear Grandma's voice, firm but kind, telling me the things I'd needed to hear for so long. She knew me, I whispered. Really knew me. Better than anyone, Aunt Cynthia agreed. Eleanor had a gift for seeing people clearly, without illusions. I carefully folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. Thank you for this. For all of it. Don't thank me, I'm just the messenger. Aunt Cynthia gestured to a passing server for the check. Now, about this family therapy session you've all agreed to. What about it? Go in with open eyes, Emma. Healing is possible, but it doesn't follow a neat timeline. And it doesn't require you to forget what happened or pretend it wasn't. As bad as it was. I nodded, taking her advice to heart. I'm trying to find the balance, standing up for myself without burning every bridge. That's all any of us can do. She signed the credit card slip, then fixed me with her penetrating gaze. Just promise me one thing? What's that? Don't settle. Not in your career, not in your relationships, and especially not in how you allow your family to treat you. Eleanor wouldn't want that, and neither do I. I promised, and we parted ways in the parking lot with a hug that felt more meaningful than any we'd shared before. As I drove home, Grandma's letter tucked safely in my purse, I felt a curious lightness. The trust fund itself was incredible, of course, a financial safety net I hadn't known existed. But more valuable was the message behind it. I had been seen, I had been valued, even when it hadn't felt that way. The following Monday, I found myself sitting in Dr. Chen's waiting room, anxiety churning in my stomach. I'd arrived early, needing time to collect my thoughts before facing my family. The room was painted a soothing sage green, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. On the walls hung framed quotations about healing and growth. The door opened, and Ryan walked in, looking as nervous as I felt. He smiled when he saw me, crossing the room to sit in the chair beside mine. "Hey," he said, bumping his shoulder gently against mine. "How are you doing?" "Terrified," I admitted. "You?" "Same. I almost turned around twice on the drive here." "But you didn't." "No," he agreed. "Too important." We sat in companionable silence until the door opened again and our parents entered together. Mom's eyes were already red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying in the car. Dad looked stiff and uncomfortable in a button-down shirt and slacks, like he was attending a business meeting rather than a therapy session. "Emma," Mom said softly. "Ryan." "Mom," we responded in unison. Dad nodded at us both, too choked up to speak. Before the awkwardness could deepen, the inner office door opened and Dr. Chen appeared. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe in her early 40s, with a calm, authoritative presence. "The Mitchell family?" she asked, though it was obvious from the tension radiating through the room. "Please come in." Her office was similar to the waiting room, calming colors, comfortable furniture arranged in a circle rather than confrontationally across from each other. We each took a seat, creating a loose diamond shape with Dr. Chen at one point. "Thank you all for coming today," she began. "I know this isn't easy, but it's an important step. Before we start, I want to establish some ground rules. Each person will have uninterrupted time to speak. We'll focus on I statements rather than accusations. And most importantly, we're here to listen and understand, not necessarily to solve everything in one session." We all nodded our agreement. "Good. Now, Emma, since you initiated this session, would you like to start by sharing what you hope to gain from our time together?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all their eyes upon me. "I want to understand if we can have a relationship moving forward, and what that might look like. I don't want to pretend the past didn't happen, but I don't want to be defined by it either." Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. "That's a thoughtful goal. Gregory, what about you?" Dad cleared his throat. "I want my family back. I want to understand where we went wrong and how to fix it." "Deborah?" Mom twisted her wedding ring nervously. "I want Emma to know how sorry we are and that we're committed to changing." "Ryan?" My brother shifted in his seat. "I want clarity about who I am, about my place in this family, and I want to make sure Emma gets what she needs this time." Dr. Chen looked at each of us in turn. "Those are all valid goals, though some may take longer than others to achieve. Let's start with the immediate issue that brought you here, the college fund." For the next 2 hours, we talked through what had happened. There were tears, mostly Mom's, raised voices, occasionally Dad's, moments of painful clarity, Ryan's, and steady, unwavering advocacy, mine. Dr. Chen guided the conversation skillfully, never allowing it to devolve into accusations or circular arguments. The most powerful moment came when Dad finally addressed the paternity question directly. "I've spent 28 years wondering," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Not every day, but often enough. Looking for myself in Ryan's face, his mannerisms, his talents. Some days I was convinced, other days the doubt would creep back in." "And did that doubt affect how you treated Ryan compared to Emma?" Dr. Chen asked. Dad's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I overcompensated. I wanted so badly to make him mine that I gave him everything: attention, opportunities, financial support. And in the process, I failed my daughter, who was unquestionably mine by blood." "Blood isn't what makes a family," Ryan said quietly. "No, it isn't," Dad agreed, meeting his gaze directly. And whatever a DNA test might say, you are my son in every way that matters. Have you decided whether to pursue genetic testing? Dr. Chen asked. Ryan and Dad exchanged a look. We've talked about it, Ryan said. And we've decided not to know, at least not right now. Whatever the biological truth, we're father and son. A DNA test won't change how we feel about each other, so what's the point? I watched them, closely, noting the relief in Dad's eyes, the resolution in Ryan's. It wasn't the choice I would have made. I'd always believed that truth, however painful, was preferable to uncertainty. But it wasn't my choice to make. And how do you feel about that decision, Emma? Dr. Chen asked, noticing my expression. It's not up to me, I said carefully. If Ryan and Dad are comfortable living with the uncertainty, that's their choice. But does it affect your ability to move forward with your family? She pressed. I considered the question. What affects me more is whether my parents can acknowledge the favoritism that happened and commit to treating us equally moving forward, regardless of Ryan's biological parentage. Mom leaned forward. We can acknowledge it, Emma. I can see now how unfair we've been to you, how we pushed you aside and put Ryan first in so many ways. It wasn't Ryan's fault, I added quickly, looking at my brother. I need everyone to understand that. I'm not angry at Ryan for being the favorite. I'm angry at Mom and Dad for creating that dynamic in the first place. And maintaining it for so long, Dad added, surprising me with his self-awareness. Even when it became obvious. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. This is good work. You're all speaking honestly about difficult truths. Now let's talk about practical steps forward. What needs to happen for this family to begin healing? The conversation shifted to specific actions and boundaries. I made it clear that while I was open to rebuilding relationships, I needed time and space. No surprise visits at Penn State, no pressure to come home for every holiday right away. My parents agreed to respect those boundaries while also committing to regular family therapy, sessions that would work around my school schedule. Ryan suggested a weekly family video call, casual, no pressure, just to stay connected during my first semester away. We all agreed that could work. By the end of the session, we hadn't solved everything, but we had a framework to build upon. As we prepared to leave, Dr. Chen gave us each a journal with a writing prompt for the week ahead. What do I need this family to understand about my experience? In the parking lot, we stood awkwardly, unsure how to say goodbye after such an emotionally charged conversation. Emma, Mom said hesitantly, would it be all right if I hugged you? The old Emma would have said yes automatically, regardless of her own feelings. The new Emma took a moment to check in with herself first. A quick one, I decided, opening my arms. Mom hugged me gently, as if afraid I might break or pull away. I love you, she whispered. I know, I replied, because despite everything, I did know that. Their love had been imperfect, unequal, sometimes harmful, but it had existed. Nonetheless, Dad stood back, sensing I wasn't ready for physical affection from him yet. We're proud of you, Emma, for standing up for yourself, for Penn State, for all of it. I nodded, accepting his words without needing to reciprocate with forgiveness. I wasn't yet ready to offer. Ryan walked me to my car. That was intense, he said, leaning against the driver's side door. Extremely. I smiled tiredly. But necessary, I think. Yeah. He studied my face. Are you really okay with me not getting the DNA test? I considered the question carefully. It's your life, Ryan. Your identity. If you're at peace with not knowing, then I support that decision. He looked relieved. Thanks, Em. Some people might need that certainty, but for me, Dad is Dad. He raised me, loved me, shaped who I am. A DNA test can't change that history. What about Vanessa? I asked. Is she okay with the uncertainty? She says what matters is who I am now, not who might have contributed to my DNA 28 years ago. A small smile touched his lips. We're talking about rescheduling the wedding, by the way. Something small, next spring maybe. I'm glad to hear that. Me too. He hesitated, then added, She wants you to be a bridesmaid, if you're comfortable with that. I was touched by the gesture. I'd like that. Ryan pushed himself off my car door. You'll be great at Penn State, Em, and not because of Mom and Dad's money or Grandma's trust fund or anything else. Because you're you, smart, determined, resilient as hell. Thanks, Ryan. I hugged him impulsively. For everything. As I drove home, I thought about the path that had led me here. 2 months ago, I'd discovered my college fund emptied, my future in jeopardy, my position in my family once again relegated to second place. In my anger and pain, I'd exposed a secret that had changed all our lives forever. The consequences had been messy, painful, transformative. Nothing was the same. Not my relationship with my parents, not Ryan's understanding of his identity, not my own sense of what family meant and what I deserved from it. And yet somehow, amid all that upheaval, I'd found something I hadn't expected. My voice, my boundaries, my worth that wasn't dependent on anyone else's validation. 2 weeks later, I stood in my dorm room at Penn State, placing the last of my books on the shelf above my desk. The room was small but bright, with a window overlooking the tree-lined quad. My roommate, Zoe, had already decorated her side with string lights and photos of her high school friends. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason, who had helped me move in that morning before heading back to Oakridge for his shift at the hospital. Room looking good? Roommate cool? I snapped a photo of my finally organized desk and sent it to him. Room look perfect. Roommate seems great. Miss you already. I'd just put my phone down when it buzzed again. This time a group text from Ryan to me, Mom, and Dad. First family video call still on for Sunday, October 7? Emma should be settled in by then. Mom responded immediately. We'll be here. Can't wait to see your dorm, Emma. Dad added. Looking forward to it. No pressure, just checking in. I smiled. Slightly at their careful wording. They were trying in their way to respect the boundaries we'd established in therapy. I typed a quick reply. Sunday works. Talk to you then. Setting my phone aside, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the items I'd saved for last, Grandma Eleanor's letter, now carefully preserved in a frame, the bracelet Ryan had given me with the bicycle charm, and a small stack of photos. I pinned Grandma's letter above my desk, where I could see it every day. A reminder that I had always been enough, exactly as I was. The bracelet went around my wrist, a symbol of the brother who was trying to rebuild our relationship on more equal footing. The photos I arranged thoughtfully on my bulletin board. Jason and me at his hospital volunteer recognition dinner. Aunt Cynthia and me at Lucille's, taken by our server at her insistence. A childhood photo of Ryan teaching me to ride a bike. And one final image, my whole family at our second therapy session, Dr. Chen having suggested a photo to mark the beginning of our healing journey. In that photo, we weren't touching, weren't even standing particularly close together. But we were all looking at the camera, all present in the moment, all committed to the difficult work ahead. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect. But it was real, messy, complicated, honest in a way we'd never been before. I stepped back to survey my completed room, my home for the next year. Around me, the sounds of campus life filtered. Through the window, students laughing, music playing, opportunities waiting. My education was secured, thanks to my parents' belated but significant sacrifice. My future beyond that was safeguarded by Grandma Eleanor's trust, and my sense of self, That had been earned through the hardest lesson of all. My parents had used my college fund for my brother's wedding, so I'd revealed our family secret. The aftermath had been painful, transformative, necessary. And while our family would never be what it once was, perhaps it could become something better. Something built on honesty rather than appearances, on respect rather than obligation, on love that didn't demand perfection or silence in return. I opened my new planner and wrote on the first page, "The truth will set you free, but first it will make you really uncomfortable." Then I added my own corollary. "Freedom is worth the discomfort." Closing the planner, I took one last look around my dorm room, the physical manifestation of the future I'd fought for, and headed out to explore my new campus, ready at last to write my own story. The spring semester at Penn State was drawing to a close, bringing with it the familiar chaos of final exams, year-end projects, and students frantically securing summer internships. From my window in Simmons Hall, I watched cherry blossoms scatter across the quad like pink snow. A fitting farewell to my freshman year. I'd just finished my last education theory paper when my phone chimed with a video call from Ryan. These calls had become our routine over the past year, sometimes scheduled, sometimes spontaneous, but always welcome. "Hey, college girl," he said when I answered, his face filling my screen. "How's the end of semester crunch treating you?" "I just submitted my final paper," I replied, showing him my laptop with the confirmation screen. "One exam to go on Thursday, then I'm officially done with freshman year." "Impressive," he nodded. "Mom and Dad want to know if you're coming home right after, or—" There it was, the careful phrasing, the hint of uncertainty. After a year of therapy, improved communication, and slow rebuilding, my family had learned not to assume or demand, but to ask instead. "I'll be home next weekend," I confirmed, staying through Memorial Day, then starting my summer job at the literacy camp. Relief crossed Ryan's face. "Good, because there's something I need to talk to you about in person. Several somethings, actually." I raised my eyebrows. "Sounds mysterious. Can I get a hint?" "Nope," he grinned. "But it's good stuff, I promise." We chatted about his job at the insurance agency, going well, Vanessa's promotion at Morgan, financial, much deserved, and the continuing renovations on their modest starter home, endless but satisfying. What we didn't discuss, what we never discussed directly during our quick catch-up calls, was the DNA test question or our still-evolving family dynamics. Those conversations were reserved for face-to-face interactions, usually with Dr. Chen, present. After we hung up, I returned to my desk, reorganizing notes for my final exam. My roommate Zoe burst in, flushed with excitement about her summer research opportunity in Boston. As she chattered about sublets and subway maps, I felt a wave of gratitude for the friendship we'd developed, one of many unexpected gifts this year had brought. The week flew by in a blur of studying, packing, and goodbye coffees with friends. Before I knew it, I was loading my suitcases into Jason's car for the drive back to Oakridge. He'd come to help me move out, a gesture that felt particularly meaningful, given how busy he was with his own nursing program. "Ready for home?" he asked as we pulled away from campus. I considered the question. Yes and no. It's still complicated, but better than it was. "That's something," he nodded. The 3-hour drive passed quickly, filled with easy conversation and comfortable silences. As we approached the Oakridge town limits, I felt the familiar mixture of tension and anticipation that now accompanied my homecomings. "Your place or your parents first?" Jason asked. "Mine," I decided. I'd kept my small apartment near the community college, using part of Grandma Eleanor's trust to cover the rent. Having my own space had proven essential during breaks, somewhere to retreat when family time became overwhelming. As we unloaded my belongings, my phone buzzed with texts from both parents. "Mom, welcome home, sweetheart. Dinner tomorrow night? 6:30? I'm making your favorite lasagna. Dad, let us know when you're settled. No rush. Proud of you finishing freshman year strong. I showed the messages to Jason, who raised his eyebrows appreciatively. They're really trying, huh? They are, I agreed. It's still a work in progress, but they're putting in the effort. I texted back my acceptance of dinner, then spent the evening unpacking and adjusting to the quieter rhythm of Oakridge after the constant energy of campus life. The next evening, I parked in front of my childhood home, sitting in my car for a moment to gather myself. The house looked different now, not because it had changed physically, but because my perception of it had transformed. It was no longer the site of painful memories and unmet expectations, but a place in transition, much like our family itself. Mom opened the door before I could knock, her face lighting up at the sight of me. Emma, you look wonderful. College agrees with you. She hugged me briefly, respecting the physical boundaries I'd established in therapy. Over her shoulder, I could see Dad hovering in the hallway, giving me space to enter on my own terms. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad, I said, stepping inside. Something smells amazing. Lasagna's almost ready, Mom confirmed. Ryan and Vanessa should be here any minute. We moved to the living room, where I noticed subtle changes, new family photos including several from my college move-in day, books about family healing on the coffee table, the conspicuous absence of the formal portrait where Ryan had always been centered while I stood slightly to the side. Dad cleared his throat. How were finals? Good, I think. Grades should be posted next week, but I'm feeling confident. Your professor's comments on your midterm papers were exceptional, Mom added, reminding me that I'd shared those evaluations during one of our video calls, and that she'd actually paid attention. The doorbell rang, saving us from potential awkwardness. Ryan and Vanessa entered, bearing a bakery box and gift bag. The graduate returns, Ryan announced, giving me a side hug. Bearing gifts, no less. I'm hardly a graduate, I laughed. Just finished freshman year. Still worth celebrating, Vanessa insisted, handing me the gift bag. Open it later. It's just a little something for your apartment. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. We'd established new patterns over the past year. Mom and Dad asking questions about my studies and campus life, then actually listening to the answers. Ryan and I sharing inside jokes without the undercurrent of competition. All of us carefully avoiding the landmines of old family dynamics. It wasn't until dessert, chocolate cake from my favorite bakery, that Ryan cleared his throat meaningfully. So, we have some news to share, he began, taking Vanessa's hand. Mom immediately perked up. Are you— No, not pregnant, Vanessa laughed, though we appreciate the enthusiasm. We've set a wedding date, Ryan announced. October 12th this fall, small ceremony at Riverside Gardens, close friends and family only. That's wonderful, Mom exclaimed while Dad nodded approvingly. Congratulations, I added sincerely. There's more, Ryan continued, glancing at Vanessa, who nodded encouragingly. We've been doing a lot of thinking about what kind of family we want to build together. About honesty and transparency and all the things we've been working on in therapy this past year. I felt a shift in the atmosphere, a collective holding of breath around the table. I've decided to take the DNA test, Ryan said quietly. I already did it, actually. The results came back last week. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad went completely still. Ryan, Mom began, her voice trembling. You don't have to— I needed to know, Mom, Ryan interrupted gently. For me. For the family Vanessa and I hope to have someday. I couldn't keep wondering. Dad's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table. And? He asked, his voice barely audible. Ryan looked directly at him. And you're my father, biologically, legally, in every way that matters. The silence that followed was profound, relief and shock and a dozen other emotions swirling together. You're sure? Dad finally managed. 99. 9% sure, Ryan confirmed. That's what the test said. Mom burst into tears, while Dad sat frozen, as if afraid to believe what he was hearing. But that doesn't change anything about how we got here, Ryan continued firmly. The lies, the uncertainty, the favoritism, all of that still happened. The fact that I'm biologically a Mitchell doesn't erase the damage caused by pretending everything was perfect when it wasn't. I watched my brother with newfound respect. A year ago, he might have used this revelation to sweep everything under the rug to pretend our family problems had been imagined or exaggerated. Now he was refusing to let biological confirmation become an excuse for denial. You're right, Dad said finally. The DNA doesn't change what we did wrong as parents, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't relieved. His voice broke on the last word. Mom wiped her eyes. I always knew, she whispered. In my heart, I knew. But I was so afraid. Afraid of what? I asked, speaking for the first time since Ryan's announcement. She looked at me, really looked at me. Afraid of losing everything. Your father, our status in the community, my parents' respect. I was young and scared and made choices that hurt everyone, especially you, Emma. She reached tentatively for my hand. I'm so sorry. I let her take my hand, not pulling away but not offering false reassurance either. I know you are, Mom. This is why we want a small wedding, Vanessa interjected gently. No lakeside resort, no elaborate performance for the community, just an honest celebration with the people who matter most. Which brings me to the next thing, Ryan said, turning to me. Emma, will you be my best woman? Stand up with me at the ceremony? I blinked in surprise. Not just a bridesmaid? Nope, I want my sister right beside me. If you're willing. The request touched me deeply. It wasn't just a wedding role being offered, but a public acknowledgement of my importance in his life, something I'd craved for as long as I could remember. I'd be honored, I told him, my voice thick with emotion. There's one more thing, Ryan continued. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. This is for you. I opened it cautiously, finding a check inside. My eyes widened at the amount, $21,946. 38. What is this? Half of what was in my trust fund from Grandma Eleanor, Ryan explained. I found out about it when I turned 25 last month. The thing is, when I read the trust documents, I realized Grandma had set aside exactly the same amount for each of us. She believed in equality, even if Mom and Dad didn't always practice it. I stared at the check, then at my brother. Ryan, I can't take this. Grandma wanted you to have it. She wanted balance, he corrected me. And so do I. Besides, Vanessa and I are doing fine financially. Your education will cost far more than our modest wedding, especially with grad school in your future. I looked from Ryan to our parents, who seemed both uncomfortable and strangely proud. This was the kind of conversation we would never have had a year ago. Open, honest, acknowledging the imbalances of the past while actively working to correct them. Thank you, I said finally, carefully returning the check to its envelope. I'll need to think about it. Ryan nodded, understanding my hesitation. No rush. It's yours, regardless of when you're ready to use it. The evening wound down shortly after, with promises of a family therapy session later in the week to process Ryan's DNA news. As I was leaving, Dad caught me alone in the foyer. Emma, he said softly, I know money doesn't fix the past, but I hope you know how proud I am of the woman you've become, not despite how we raised you, but maybe because you had the strength to overcome it. Coming from anyone else, the words might have seemed like an attempt to take credit for my resilience. But I'd learned to read my father better over the past year of careful reconciliation. Thank you, Dad, I said simply. And about Ryan's offer. He hesitated. Whatever you decide is right. Just know that your mother and I are committed to supporting your education completely. That money I put back in your college fund, it's just the beginning of making things right." I nodded, not quite ready to fully embrace his promise, but acknowledging the effort behind it. "I'll see you at therapy on Thursday." Jason was waiting at my apartment when I returned, eager to hear how the family dinner had gone. I told him everything: Ryan's DNA results, the wedding plans, the unexpected check. "What are you going to do about the money?" he asked when I'd finished. I sank onto the couch beside him. "I don't know. Part of me wants to take it, not because I need it right now, but because it represents balance, like Ryan said, equality, all the things I fought for. But another part wonders if taking it means staying financially entangled with my family when I've worked so hard to establish independence." Jason considered this. "Maybe the answer isn't yes or no, but how? You could put it aside. For now, use it for something specific later. Grad school, a house down payment, something that represents an investment in your future that you control completely." I leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his perspective. "When did you get so wise?" "I've been paying attention this past year," he said, kissing the top of my head. "Watching you set boundaries, rebuild relationships on your terms, it's been pretty impressive." "It's been exhausting," I admitted. "Worth it, but exhausting." The next morning, I woke early and drove to Riverside Park, the site of so many pivotal conversations over the past year. The morning was quiet, with just a few joggers making their way along the pathways. I found my favorite bench overlooking the water and sat down, letting memories wash over me. So much had changed since that day I'd discovered my empty college fund. I'd lost my illusions about my family but gained a clearer understanding of myself. I'd risked everything to stand up for what I deserved, and found a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I'd exposed secrets that had been buried for decades, causing pain, but also creating space for authentic healing. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Cynthia. "Heard you're back in town. Lunch at Lucille's tomorrow? I want to hear all about college." I smiled, typing my acceptance. Aunt Cynthia had become a steady presence in my life, offering wisdom without judgment and support without conditions. Another unexpected gift from the upheaval I'd caused. I opened my journal, a habit I'd developed during therapy, and wrote, Year 1. Reflections. What I've learned. Truth is both more painful and more freeing than I imagined. Healing isn't linear or final, it's daily work. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or returning to old patterns. I am enough exactly as I am. Thanks, Grandma Eleanor. What I still need to work on. Trusting that change can be real and lasting. Accepting help, without fear of strings attached. Finding my voice without anger as its fuel. Building the future I want, not just escaping the past I resented. I closed the journal, watching the sunlight dance across the river. The path forward wasn't perfect or guaranteed. My relationship with my parents would likely always carry the scars of our history. Ryan and I were forging a new kind of sibling bond. Equal, supportive, honest in ways we'd never been before. And I was discovering who Emma Mitchell really was, separate from the roles I'd been assigned in my family's drama. As I walked back to my car, I found myself thinking about the upcoming fall semester at Penn State, the education classes I'd registered for, the teaching future that stretched before me. I thought about Ryan and Vanessa's wedding, where I would stand proudly beside my brother as his best woman. I thought about the continuing therapy sessions with my family, sometimes difficult, but always worthwhile. And I realized that the college fund that had been taken from me, the catalyst for everything that had happened, had given me something far more valuable than money. It had given me the push I needed to reclaim my worth, to demand truth, to Rebuild my life and relationships on a foundation of honesty rather than illusion. I stopped at the old oak tree where Ryan and I had carved our initials as children. The marks were still there, weathered but visible. RM plus EM, surrounded by a lopsided heart. I traced the letters with my finger, then took out my keys and carefully added a plus sign and the current year below our decades-old carving. Not erasing the past, but adding to it. Acknowledging both what had been and what could still be. When I arrived back at my apartment, I made two decisions. First, I wrote an email to Dr. Chen, requesting an individual session during my time home. There were things I wanted to process outside of family therapy, plans I wanted to make for my continued growth and healing. Second, I took out Ryan's check and deposited it via my banking app, not to use immediately, but to set aside for the future I was building on my own terms. A future that might include my family, but would never, again be defined or limited by them. That evening, as I prepared for bed, my phone lit up with a text from Ryan. "Breakfast tomorrow? Just us." I smiled and typed back. "Pancakes at the daily grind. 9 a.m. I'll beat you at Scrabble again." His response came quickly. "You wish. Prepare to be vocabularily destroyed." I laughed out loud, a sound that once had been rare in relation to my family, but was becoming more common. Not because everything was fixed or forgotten, but because I was learning that healing could include joy, that setting boundaries could create space for new connections, that standing up for myself didn't have to mean standing alone. My parents had used my college fund for my brother's wedding, and I had revealed our family secret in response. The aftermath had been messy, painful, transformative. But as I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, older, wiser, steadier, than I'd been a year ago, I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't change a thing. The truth had set us all free, in different ways and at different paces. And that freedom, however complicated, was worth every difficult step of the journey. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.